I'm absolutely delighted that I have the honour of introducing the next speaker, who is a colleague of mine, the lovely Dominique Phillips, yeah. And Dominique's going to be talking to us about family care's experience of altering work arrangements to provide care, a qualitative case study approach. So Dominique holds a bachelor's in science in psychology and a master's in health psychology. She is currently a research assistant on the HRB-funded Carewell project in UCD, which aims to promote health among family carers in the workplace. Dominique is a former disability support worker and is interested in the social determinants of health and tackling health inequalities. Thanks, Dominique.
Thank you, Attracta. So I'm going to talk about family carers experiences of altering work arrangements to provide care. And this issue has sort of emerged throughout the day across different presentations. And I'd like to acknowledge my team members who are named here as co-authors, and many of whom are here today, so thanks to them. So to start off, I'm going to talk about the Carewell project, some background to the research, the current Irish policy context, the aim of our research, the methods we used, some of our findings, and then the implications for policy. So the Carewell project is the development of a workplace programme to promote health and self-care behaviours among working family carers. And Dr. Attracta Lafferty is the principal investigator on this project. We hope to achieve this through a number of integrated objectives. And if you'd like some more information about the project, our website is there. So the issue of balancing work and care is becoming increasingly important due to a number of changing demographics. So an ageing population and a shift in dependency ratio, as well as more women participating in the workforce. People now have longer working lives, so we see more delayed retirement, and also smaller family sizes. So a combination of these changing demographics mean that we are facing an imminent care gap, and we're also likely to see an increase in those who are combining work and care. And according to the CSO, 54.6% of the Irish population are balancing work and care, but as we know, this figure may not be representative. So without adequate supports, family caring can impact work patterns in many different ways, including a reduction in work hours, for example, from full-time to part-time work, taking up occasional work or casual work arrangements to facilitate your caring role, missed career opportunities and being unable to pursue additional training opportunities, and also some carers may feel forced to take early retirement. This can mean reduced pension contributions and can impact quality of life later in life and after their caring role has ended. We also know that if carers are not supported, it may result in a complete withdrawal from the labour market. And the research indicates that if an employee has 20 hours or more care responsibilities, they're at an increased risk of leaving the labour market. We also know that once carers make this decision to alter their work arrangements or to leave the labour market, it's unlikely that they will return to the same levels of employment. So it's really important that people are made aware of the potential long-term consequences of this decision. So just a quick look at the existing literature. So research that examines family caring and balancing it with paid employment has really looked at it from a negative perspective, and having multiple roles of care and employee can lead to work-family conflict and increased caregiver burden. There's been called for a more balanced approach to the research, but we also know that carers who are in employment have better psychological and physical health outcomes compared to people who are caring full-time. So this suggests that employment can be protective of the potentially negative effects of caring, and this may be as a result of the respite that employment provides from caring, maintaining social connectedness, as well as protecting financial well-being. Employers are also starting to acknowledge the business case for supporting family carers to remain in employment. So again, without adequate supports, having a caring role may result in a loss of productivity, increased absenteeism and presenteeism, decreased employee engagement and morale, and as we've seen, staff turnover. Carers are most likely to be between the ages of 40 and 65 years old, and this represents the most experienced and qualified staff within an organisation's workforce. So it makes sense that they would want to keep this staff and support them to remain in employment. Employers may also face recruitment and training costs, and in the current labour market, there is a war on talent, and employers want to attract and retain experienced staff. And one of the ways employers can do this is by offering family-friendly and carer-friendly workplace policies. But we know that the availability of these policies varies greatly depending on employer size or even location. So a quick look at the Irish policy context. So we've heard a lot about the National Carers Strategy today, and one of the objectives in this strategy is to enable carers to remain in touch with the labour market to the greatest extent possible. However, there's been varying levels of progress made with this objective. We've also heard a lot about the state income supports available in Ireland. Carers Benefit, which is a payment based on an employee's PRSI contributions, and Carers Allowance, which is a means-tested payment, and the 15-hour rule that we've heard about today, which enables carers to work and study for up to 15 hours in addition to receiving this income support, and this has been increased to 18.5 hours in the most recent budget. In Ireland, we also have the Carers Leave Act, which is a relatively progressive piece of legislation when you look at international policy. So carers can take job-protected leave of a minimum of 3 months and up to 2 years per care recipient. However, there's no obligation that this leave will be paid. So what this really identifies is a current policy gap for short-term and paid leave options in Ireland. However, this may change with the implementation of the EU Directive for Work-Life Balance. So I believe this needs to pass through one more stage of the European Commission, and then we will have 3 years to adopt these provisions into law. And what this ensures for carers is a minimum of 5 days carers leave per year per employee, and also will give carers the right to request flexible work arrangements. However, there is some flexibility in how we can adopt this into law. So member states have some flexibility around whether the 5 days carers leave will be paid, and also there's some flexibility around how the term carer can be defined. And so this brings me on to the aim of the current research. And we wanted to explore the experiences of family carers who have had to give up work or alter their work arrangements to provide care. And to achieve this aim, we adopted a multi-case study approach. And we spoke to 10 family carers, and they were in-depth, semi-structured, face-to-face interviews. And we found when we first put out our recruitment call, we had an all-female response. And we wanted to use maximum variation sampling. So we wanted to speak to people with a variety of work, family and care situations. So you can see here in the social media post that we put out a second call for male participants in a hope to get more balance. All of the interviews were audio taped and transcribed, and we have developed a number of vignettes to present each case example. So I can only present a flavour of some of our findings, and I've broken these down into the participant demographics, some of their work care arrangements, and then I will present 3 case examples. So this is a quick overview of the participant demographics of the people we spoke to, and you can see here the different regions in Ireland where they were based. We have some mix of rural and urban participants, and again some mix in gender, and we really had to put in an effort to recruit those 3 male participants. They aged between 38 and 65 years old, and they were providing care for a variety of different reasons, including old age, dementia, MS, intellectual disability, genetic disorders, and spinal injury. And their relationship to their care recipient also varied. We had 6 parental carers, we spoke to 2 adult child carers, and 2 spousal carers. 7 of the participants were caring for 1 person, and 3 of the participants were caring for 2 people. So here's a quick look at some of their work and care arrangements. 5 participants were juggling work and care at the time of the interview. 4 participants were caring full-time, and 1 participant had returned to employment after a period of caring. And here's a breakdown of their employment sectors. So 5 were public sector employees, 4 were private sector employees, and 1 participant was working in the public and private sector. And initially, when we put out the first call for recruitment, we had it was all public sector employees who got in touch. And again, we used that maximum variation sampling to try and get a bit more balance. And what we found was that family carers altered their work arrangements in many different ways. 1 participant felt forced to take early retirement, another voluntary redundancy. Carers took career breaks and carers leave. Some parental carers used parental leave to accommodate their caring role. Others altered their working hours, such as starting earlier in the morning or finishing earlier, or even working through their lunch hour. And in the case of 1 self-employed carer, they just stopped accepting work opportunities. And we also found that 1 carer moved to a more family-friendly employer based on that employer's reputation. So next is 1 case example, and what this example shows is that the policy implication is that there's inadequate services. So this was a male carer, and he cared for 2 adult daughters with a profound intellectual disability, and he successfully balanced work and care for 18 years. He had a supportive employer and colleagues. But when the girls turned 18 and they transitioned to adult services, there was no service available. So this carer felt forced to take early retirement as there was simply no alternative. And you can see in his quote here, when this came on then about not having a service, then that really forced my mind on it, and I felt I had no option but to go. So the girls finished school at the end of June 2013, and I retired on the 30th of June. So because we knew for definite we had the summer without any help. Do I resent it? I don't. I would have liked it to have been different. I'd have liked to have gone on my own terms, but I'm grateful for the fact that I was able to go and look after my family in the way that they needed it. So this carer would have liked to have continued working for the next couple of years. However, it wasn't an option for him. And he and his family continue to worry about future care arrangements. And based on their experience, he worries about when he and his wife won't be available to care for his daughters. So the next example shows the need for policy that supports flexibility and promotes family-friendly company culture. So this was a female carer who cared for her daughter with an intellectual disability and complex needs. She worked in a male-dominated field with very inflexible working hours. And when her daughter was born, she took carers leave. Well, after her daughter was born, she took carers leave for 6 months. And when she returned to work again, she was pregnant with her 2nd child. At this point, she felt forced to take voluntary redundancy. as her employer was simply unwilling to accommodate her needs. And you can see this clearly in how she spoke. I was the first woman in that department to go on maternity leave, not to mind have any other complications. And there were other women in that department who were newly married and they were obviously about to start having children. And they just said that they didn't want to set a precedent. If they allowed me to go part-time, everyone would want it. This annoyed me on a number of levels. Like number one, why wouldn't you support highly skilled, dedicated staff to have some flexibility and retain that staff? And even if they don't see that, I don't know how they couldn't say that my situation was different, given my daughter's diagnosis and all of her medical needs. So 10 years on, you can still really sense the frustration around how she was treated within her workplace. And this carer now has 2 additional qualifications. She works in a flexible environment and is happy to have that flexibility, but she is on a lower salary compared to what she was on 10 years ago. So there is a bit of a sacrifice there for the flexibility. And then this final example shows the implications when a carer returns to work after a period of caring. So this was a female carer who cared for both parents while she was in paid employment until she reached a breaking point. And at this point, she decided to take a career break. She took a career break instead of carers leave because her father was actually in receipt of carers allowance, and she didn't want to take that independence away from him. But now she's experiencing repercussions in terms of PRSI contributions. And she has now returned to her previous job, but has also experienced some unforeseen consequences. Basically, I went back to work and they gave him my office. And I mean, look, that's a message. So I had a huge status drop. I think it was very poorly managed. Some of that was unfortunate because there was a change in management. But it was very unfair the way things worked out afterwards. And that was not my choice really to leave. I only left because I absolutely couldn't stay. So that was very unfair actually. And this particular carer is still adapting to life without her caring roles. And she said that she was careful with her energy, and this continues to impact her career progression as she's not as able to take on additional training opportunities. And what we found across the 10 cases was that flexibility is key on a day-to-day basis, but also in the longer term as the caring role changes. There's a clear need for a supportive management, and even just one line manager can make a huge difference in your ability to balance work and care. Organisations need to do better at fostering family-friendly cultures within organisations among managers and colleagues. And a lot of carers spoke about the ongoing impact of the recession, particularly around the availability of respite services. And many carers described the fight for services as a full-time job, which really hindered their ability to balance work and care. A lot of people also described inadequate home care and replacement care, which again meant that people simply couldn't leave the house to go to work. And unsurprisingly, carers felt that their caring role was not as valued as paid employment within society. And this was felt in terms of how services are organised, and even the stigma around receiving social welfare payments. So based on our findings, there's a number of implications for policy. First of all, to enable carers to balance work and care, the cared for person and the carer need to be at the centre of policy design. There also needs to be a shared responsibility between the government and at employer level. And we also found that policy really matters, and that the Carers Leave Act is currently a key mechanism that carers use when they're in employment. And perhaps with more availability of short-term and paid leave options, that carers would choose this option instead of the carers leave. There's also a need for an investment in services and replacement care. However, on the back of Budget 2020, this seems unlikely in the foreseeable future. And there's also a clear need to employers to tailor to employees' needs, and a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. However, these suggestions for policy also raise a number of challenges. First of all, organising policy across government and workplace levels so that the the maximum amount of carers can benefit is a challenge, and also across sectors, employment, healthcare and service provision. The implementation of the EU Directive for Work-Life Balance, it's a challenge, but this directive has huge potential to really benefit people who are balancing work and care in Ireland. Although we said a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work, there's also issues around handling employees' needs on a case-by-case basis. And finally, with the EU directive and the right for carers to request flexible work arrangements, how can we make flexible work arrangements more flexible? And in the example of small and medium-sized companies, customer-facing roles or frontline staff, it may seem initially that you can't offer flexibility to those people, but even small changes could really help them balance their multiple roles. So I'd just like to finish by sincerely thanking the 10 family carers who shared their experience with us and were so open. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dominic. That's a really interesting presentation, and obviously sounds like a fantastic project. So, have we any questions? Thanks, Rob.
Well, I thought that was a very nice and a very balanced presentation about the real story. I think the point you made early on about people of working age who are in employment having a more positive quality of life, emotional status and health status is really important. Not that I understand fully why amongst those outside employment it's so poor, but it does argue for some benefits of employment, full stop. And what we've seen across the EU over the last 15 years is obviously increasing employment rates in general and increasing employment rates of family carers in nearly all member states. Partly, I think, because of some changes made in the workplace by employers to introduce some of this more flexible strategy. My question was, why didn't you mention trade unions? Because, at EU level at least, this agenda on work-life balance, very importantly, is about a so-called modern approach to working life. And trade unions have had a quite fundamental role at EU level. Are they not so important in your Irish context?
Well,
to repeat the question?
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Just Rob's question is, what about trade unions in Ireland? Is this an issue for them as it would be at European level?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this area. I started in this role a few months ago, and in the research that I've looked at in the Irish context, I haven't come across anything that mentioned Irish trade unions. So I wonder if anyone here has come across anything. Nope.
What I would add to that, if you don't mind, Dominic,
Sure.
is, I would see this as a fairly new field within Ireland. So it's been there, but it's the first time it's starting to be addressed. And, trade unions is a group that we have to bring awareness of it to as well. And as some of you may have seen, we're having an event on the 5th of December, and we're hoping to have some trade union representatives there. And the purpose of that event is to get the key stakeholders under the one roof so that we can raise awareness and start the conversation about supporting carers to balance work with care. Laura.
If I could just say, I thought your presentation was wonderful, the content and the actual presentation itself, so well done. And no, I just think that it's just for every reason, financial, social, the mental health, every reason, it is so important for carers that wish to still engage with work to be able to do so. It's just of critical importance, even just in terms of their self-identity and their life beyond caring. So just well done on all the work.
Thank you. And a tractor.
Ronan, need a question.
It's kind of linked to the previous comments as well. I mean, the nature of work is changing. The network is changing furiously. How does somebody who works in the gig economy care? That's a really important question. Home working, and accept that it's pretty difficult to be a carer at home when your main focus is on the person, your care recipient. But there are flexibilities increasingly around working from home. We live in a world where it is quite IT based, you know, so there must be some space there for growth in terms of flexibility of home working against the more threatening neoliberal view of how work essentially owns a person and how do you care in an environment where that sort of model of working is coming out. That's why the trade unions are so important.
Yeah.
This stuff wouldn't happen without so much trade union push.
Yeah, so I think, Ronan, your questions around the flexible work options and maybe remote working as well, and how that can kind of maybe work well sometimes with helping people to balance work with care. So I don't know, Dominic, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think what you said about the gig economy is really important, and I need to keep that in mind as well moving forward. And just like in terms of working from home, remote working, flexible work arrangements, what we found is that some carers really loved having that option to work from home, and other carers really loved the option of going to work. So yeah, and that really varied.
And I get the importance of work as a restaurant.
Yes,
But it's the way that the economy is presented as being flexible. You know, that's how it's presented. The reality is utterly different.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Take one more.
I suppose it just struck me, and you mentioned it as well during your presentation. It's just that it requires more than just the employers to feed into it. So obviously for somebody who's providing care, we need the flexibility in employment for sure, you know, to go to appointments for maybe, you know, not being able to start as early as we'd like, etc. But my experience has been, and I don't have my own experience, but a lot of people I know can't work because the services are not there to look after the person that they usually care for. So I think there's two sides to the coin. So the employment is one side of it, and the other side of it is that there's provision, that there's adequate care provided to free the person up to, because even if you're working from home, you know, particularly if somebody has a lot of needs, they're still going to need a replacement care while you're not there. And some people, particularly with disability, is what I would have experience of, but and I know there are some families, you know, particularly when the person in the family reaches adulthood, that there's very little service provided to them. So I know it's not part of your particular thing, but in order for it to work, I think we have to look at it from both sides.
So just to repeat that just for the live stream, that Mary was just talking about the importance of replacement care and the need to ensure that services are actually there in the first place to allow people to go out to work, and that there are services available in replacement care. And if I could just put another plug in for our event on the 5th of December, we have Dr. Derry King coming over from the London School of Economics, and his paper is around replacement care, and they did took an economic view of how whether it's worth it or what's more expensive, you know, the person providing care at home, or whether the services, you know, what their services there available, and also the cost of both of those going out and those staying at home. So it'll be an interesting paper as well. Okay, I think we're going to move on. Is all right? Thank you, Dominic.